Ad Infinitum is the only podcast solely focused on audio ads.
Advertising.
The creatives who make them, and or the latest thinking that informs them, how the space is evolving, and, my favorite part, a roundup of recent audio ads,
ad campaign
analysis by yours truly, Stew Redwine, VP Creative Services at Oxford Road, and each episode's guest. This episode is titled Why Now? Discussing the Audiolytics Key Components offer, scarcity, and path. Why should the listener take action? By when? And where do they need to go? A note on these three Audiolytics Key Components is that they're primarily focused on advertising messages that require immediate action. If the time horizon is longer, not all of these components need to be optimized, but that's always the question, is time horizon. When do I need the listener to take action by? John Caples says in the 5th edition of Tested Advertising Methods, you must filter every aspect of the advertisement through this question. What argument would make you part with good money in order to buy the product or service you are advertising? Would a great offer move you better than any offer available anywhere else? Would knowledge that the offer has an element of scarcity to it drive you to act? Would knowing exactly what path to follow to take advantage of the offer be the thing that induces you to purchase? Yes, yes, and yes. The offer is more than just a discount. It is everything from a unique discount to something free, a guarantee, or any other kind of incentive. Like a 1773 tea ad that read, "Excellent good Bohea tea, imported in the last ship from London, sold by Theo Hancock NB. If it don't suit the lady's taste, they may return the tea and receive their money again." Scarcity is the most persuasive when it is real. For instance, when running a test campaign, make an offer that is the best available anywhere and make it truly scarce. It will only be offered through a specific date, or perhaps it is tied to a seasonal event like Father's Day. Another way to talk about scarcity is limited supply. And the path. Where must the audience go to take advantage of this tremendous opportunity? The goal is clarity above all else. Tell them exactly where you need them to go and what you need them to do in the simplest way possible. If you can shorten a URL's name, do it. If it needs to be spelled, spell. If you're asking them to go to a URL and enter a promo code, at least make it easy. But the goal is to ask the listener to take as few steps as possible, and that includes keystrokes, actions, or even things they have to remember. When it comes to offer, scarcity, and path, don't be quick to dismiss the power they hold over your cash register ringing. If you don't have an offer or scarcity and have a convoluted path, you have hobbled your message. It may still connect emotionally. It may still give the audience a fond recollection of your brand when they hear it again someday. But if you need to make the cash registers ring, especially as you test out a new channel, then you must include all three. This episode's guest is Amanda DeMarco, VP of Client Success at Veritonic, and we've had the pleasure of working together on a handful of campaigns. In fact, we have some creative that's testing currently in the Veritonic platform. So welcome to Ad Infinitum, Amanda.
Thanks, Stu. This is a really exciting one to be a part of.
I'm so glad that you're here. So a little bit about Veritonic. Veritonic is a comprehensive platform that provides independent and holistic audio data and analytics. It is trusted by leading brands, agencies like Oxford Road, and platforms around the world for full funnel audio optimization and measurement, including NPR, SiriusXM, Acast, Sports Clips, The New York Times, Indeed, Shopify, and more. Like I said, we've used it on a number of campaigns. We're using it right now. And what I love about Veritonic is that it has a Veritonic audio score, and that's a common metric like Audiolytics that gives you a universal way of assessing and talking about podcast ads, radio ads, streaming ads, audio logos, you name it. Veritonic is powered by machine listening and learning, trained through years of analyzing audio files, correlating them with second-by-second human response data and predicting response. And we're going to be using the predictive scores from Veritonic along with Oxford Road's Audiolytics scores to analyze some audio ads in this episode. And Amanda, can you break down the difference between the type of scoring Veritonic offers and what we're going to be using today?
Taking it back to the history of Veritonic, there was a need to put data against making decisions for audio, whether it be music or audio ads. Historically, folks would sit in a room, they'd use their gut or their experience or the opinion, but there was no definitive way to understand what was performing better and why. So for over 8 years, Veritonic's been testing all forms of audio logos, music, podcast episodes, audio ads, and the audio ads is what we're talking about today. So over those 8 years, we've been able to gather a tremendous amount of targeted audience human response data that's given us a really robust set of benchmarking over across 35 plus different industries, whether it be podcast versus radio ads, retail versus CPG, English versus Spanish. And it's really helped enable companies to answer the simple day-to-day questions. Is my ad set up for success? How is my ad performing against my competition? Which of my ad variations will connect with my audience the most and drive intent? So over these tens of thousands of assets that we've tested, we've also been able to develop predictive score, which you mentioned, through machine listening and learning, that gives an instant prediction of our ads and the audio files based on their sonic DNA. So without going too far into the core methodology of it, that's what we're going to be talking about. How can you make a quick decision based off of consistent performing elements of an audio ad that you have data around and know that you're putting your best foot forward before going into the market?
Yeah, it's a fantastic tool. It's evidence-based marketing, like you said, transitioning from the Mad Men era of going with the creative genius or perhaps the most powerful person in the room, what have you, to is there evidence? Is there something that we can look at objectively to help us inform this decision? And it can be nuanced. You guys look at different verticals, or like the study that you just put out. Veritonic just put together a study about holiday ads, and that's very much related to what we're talking about with offers, seasonality, promotions. All the parts that are in, the Audiolytics Key Components of offer, scarcity, and path are the CTA, the call to action. So in that study, I really enjoyed going through that. What are some of the big trends that you saw?
There's been really interesting elements that come out of it. And, one thing that we focus on in our testing is removing the bias, right? Using a bunch of different questions and metrics to help identify the inert reaction to content ads. In this specific study, we actually kicked it over to the subjective opinions of listeners. What are they looking at? What are they looking for? And a few really interesting observations came out of this holiday study. More than 56% of monthly audio and podcast listeners surveyed will rely on the ads they hear on podcasts to get gift ideas for themselves, family, and friends. So using audio ads to help keep not only a brand, but their competitors, right, top of mind is something that consumers are looking for. 76% of US respondents who regularly listen to podcasts and streaming audio expect hearing ads with discount codes. And I think this one's actually really interesting because if we think back to how podcasting and podcast advertising started, the earlier days were host-read ads. There was always a promo. There was a very specific promo tied, put in the show name or my name for a discount code on the website, and that very direct to consumer promotion, if you will. And now that we've gotten into this world of programmatic and advanced technology, dynamically inserted ads, there's a lot more opportunity and variation in ads to be placed and to be created. And I think the dynamic shifts a little bit. But what we've done is I think we've led consumers to expect it. And we're hearing that from their response that over 3/4 of them want to hear those discount codes.
Exactly. I remember talking with you before the show about that. That was such a great observation of it's something that is part and parcel with this channel, especially in the early days. And then you look at a statistic like this, 76% are expecting to hear some kind of offer during the holidays. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about, right? What is the call to action? Is there a special offer? In short, why now? Why do I need to take action now? So with no further ado, are you ready to jump in and review these ads?
Yeah, let's do it. But before we even jump into listening to them, I think there's some really interesting elements at play that sometimes are forgotten when we think about creating ads. I get asked all the time, what's the best practice for a podcast ad? What should the voice be? Should I use music? What should the length be? But we can't take a blanket approach to creating podcast ads. We can't even necessarily say that a podcast ad is the same as a radio ad. The real big reason behind this is not all ads are created equal and not all brands are created equal. The needs of the consumer are not equal across all these. Ads cannot all have the same best practices. And, what's super critical is for brands and the creators behind it to understand these factors and be able to influence and speak to audience purchase behaviors, product barriers to entry. What is the cost of a product? What are the purchase cycles, right? Because all these different factors will require different element or level of information to be shared with that consumer. We're talking a lot about retail in these examples when we're jumping into it. And most commonly, these retail brands and these industries have high industry awareness. We know what a retail company does. We know highly, most brands that play in that space So because that awareness is already there, you don't necessarily have to spend as much time explaining what that product does, explaining the differentiators, explaining the why behind each one of them. And we find that, in retail, for example, you can work with a shorter ad. But when you think about B2B, for an example, or you think about another industry or brand where, okay, I need to speak to a limited audience, I need to explain what this product does. So now not only am I explaining what this product does, why is my brand different? What are my competitive advantages against others in the space? And why do you need my product? All of that needs to be curated in a very well-received way. And that is very different than, QSR, again, in retail, where it's like, here's a reminder of who the players are. And like, hey, I'm tapping in to say, remember me versus other of that top of mind. And that's something that I really want to level set folks on, specifically even as we're listening through these ads, is really pressure testing what needs to be explained in these ads. And those will help guide those best practices. And, some of them that we've really seen that do stick standard, not to say that everything has to be a one-off scenario and analyze, always brand mentions early and often. We have, a tremendous amount of studies that say 4 times on average is, the perfect spot. If it's less than the shorter ad, that's great. You always want to do it more than once. If you start brand mentions more than 4 times, it plateaus a little bit. In podcasting, music plays a different role. Historically in radio ads, music needs to grab your attention because you're driving or you're, listening to space. Podcasting is much more intimate. So it's about the messaging connecting. And, we don't see that podcast necessarily moves the needle, but doesn't hurt it either. So it gives you a lot more flexibility to play. One thing that is super important in podcasting specifically is authenticity, and authenticity is key, especially with a host-read ad. Consumers can hear in your voice if you're reading a script, and if it's not a genuine recommendation, that can often hurt the ad more than it is benefiting it. And there's been data that really specifically, it's one of our key Veritonic emotional components, and we see really strong correlations with authenticity, relevancy, and trust as tying directly to intent. And I think that is, just a really important reminder here in this space. And the other thing is sonic branding. So that is something that has really been evolving, I'd say, in the audio space recently. A lot of brands are investing for the first time or reinvesting in tweaking their classic audio logo or sonic branding, whether it be, we're going to listen to a Home Depot ad, and traditionally they've had, their consistent mnemonic that is played throughout the ad, but, brands also have that end jingle, right? The short couple second melody at the end that represents that brand. And specifically, even in podcasting, it doesn't show as frequently or often as it does in TV or radio ads. But in a study that we did with Odyssey a few years back, it supported that placing your sonic branding in podcast ads specifically boosted recall scores by up to 14%. So all of those, no matter the industry or the brand, are core critical elements that will set any ad up for success. But I do think those are, really important and interesting factors to pull out before we even dive in here.
Well said, Amanda. Well said. You have already given our listeners plenty to focus on to help improve their audio ads. So thank you for that. Let's get into these. So we're going to be analyzing the top spenders in the top 100 podcasts from the Veritonic platform. And let's go with the first one we've got here is Bed, Bath & Beyond.
Your dream home just got a little more real. Bed Bath & Beyond is back with more to love than ever before. At the new Bed Bath & Beyond, you'll find the products and brands you know with styles for every room and budget, along with a huge selection of furniture and decor, all in one amazing online store. Download the new app today and get a 25% off coupon to celebrate our grand reopening. Plus, get free shipping right to your front door. Welcome to a bigger, better Beyond.
All right, so that is Bed Bath & Beyond. First one. Amanda, why don't you give me the score, how that's relative to the scoring system in Veritonic, and then what your top level observations are?
Yeah, so that ad scored a 64. And we look across a bunch of different metrics against the Veritonic audio score, which is an average of attributes, recall, intent, and engagement. And all of them have their own metrics behind it. What I can say is that 64 scored well above the retail benchmark. So from a checkbox element, that did perform rather well at the top end of a handful of other retail ads that we have here in the system. What stood out most about this is that it actually the highest recall score at 61 and also was considered the most energetic and powerful, which I think could easily be heard and picked up on. I think a few elements that stood out to me in this ad was the inclusion of their Sonic logo. Again, the energy was very high in the ad. The brand was mentioned early and it was mentioned often. And there was that really strong call to action of download the app, get the 25% off. There's free shipping involved and calling attention that this is the new Bed Bath & Beyond. It was able to really capture a lot of different information in a way that was still easy and digestible for a consumer to respond to.
I'm right there with you. I mean, just my personal reaction to it. I love a funky bass lick, so I was in it. I love it. I'm grooving along with it. And from an Audiolytics standpoint, it did very well. It scored at 84% because of all the things you've mentioned. Like structurally, it's there. It's clear. So this is a strong one coming right out of the gates. Let's jump into the next one from one of my favorites in audio, the Home Depot. Here we go.
When the holidays come to town, so do your friends and your family. So get to the Home Depot for everything you need to tackle those easy projects to prep your home for the holidays with up to 40% off select online bath for your project. Get your bathrooms guest ready with a modern Glacier Bay Tabana vanity or an Oswald faucet in matte black with free delivery on all online vanities and faucets at the Home Depot. How doers get more done.
Bed Bath & Beyond had a Veritonic predictive score of 64. Where's Home Depot standing?
Yeah, this one was pretty close. And I think to call out, I don't know if folks recognized it while listening, that this was a host-read ad. And that 62, is also rather strong. They didn't include their classic music, which is really interesting for Home Depot. I think every other ad that you hear has a deep guitar entry. I think most folks can probably even play it back in their mind. But what this ad did have was an intent score of 73, which was the highest of these four ads and was the most authentic and the most unique. So going back to those best practices we talked about, here's data yet again, correlating a highest intent score and a highest authenticity score. And I think this is the perfect example of, a host having a genuine read. And I think, something that's really interesting about how this ad was laid out, it was, a very smooth read by the host. You couldn't really tell she was reading off a script until you got to some of the really strong descriptors of the modern Glacier Bay, Tabana, vanity, where, if a listener is listening rather closely, they might be able to pick that up. But I still think it was a rather well-read ad. Home Depot was mentioned, really fast within the first 5 seconds. And altogether, the score supports the strength of this creative.
All right. So the Home Depot came in at a 74.1% on Audiolytics, which is tracking along there with Veritonic, right? It's lower than Bed Bath & Beyond. I think, again, everything that you're calling out, it's important to note it's a host-read ad, and, this is from podcast, so we give it that credit of going, we're listening to these things without context, so to speak, but in the context of the podcast, knowing and recognizing that that's the host, even though we do encourage, people self-identifying or saying something to personalize it a bit more, that it's not just relying on recognition of the host's voice. But this is, there are opportunities where this could be stronger from the Home Depot, especially looking at offer, scarcity, and path. I mean, there is an offer there. It is tied into the holidays. They do, are talking about the fact of at the Home Depot, they use their tagline, how doers get more done. So, it's strong, but kind of like you were saying, it's like, you're used to the guitar lick and all this stuff. Like in a host-read ad, could that be something tying back to that study you'd mentioned early on, 14% improvement using the sonic branding? Could they figure out a way to incorporate, even with hosts, some kind of sound effect or some aspect of the song? Like, would that actually help this be even stronger because there's so much weight behind that? So far we're tracking right along. Let's take a listen to the next one.
Football's back, and Whole Foods Market has everything you need for a delicious tailgate or watch party. Level up your game day hosting with marinated chicken wings, chicken sausages, hot dogs, and more. Headed to a friend's house? On the way, grab crowd-pleasing snacks from Whole Foods Market, like Late July tortilla chips and Primal Kitchen queso dip. And don't forget the beer. Very important. Just check out that local selection. Elevate game day with Whole Foods Market. Must be 21 plus. Please drink responsibly.
All right, Amanda. Wow, that's a really football-y voice. What did you think of that one, Amanda?
I think you might be the next voiceover for Whole Foods over here. I think you called out a really interesting element of that ad. So overall, it scored a 60 on our side. So still above benchmarks, had strong recall. But we actually saw some of our emotional attributes start to dip a little bit. I think it's a good call out here because the other strategic element about creative and audio ads that we didn't talk about earlier is how many different creative variations is optimal in any one given campaign. And when you think about this ad specifically, I think it was definitely directed towards a very unique audience. And had we tested this against a specific human audience and panel, we probably would start to see some really strong differentiators in how females scored the ad versus males, or those that are, really interested in football versus those that are not really interested in football, and the intent that would be driven to Whole Foods. But there is a strategy in play there when you can optimize your audio creative to speak to small buckets of audiences at a more optimal state. And when you put those all together, you're actually hitting and speaking to a greater dynamic and a greater pool of listeners versus just using one ad that maybe hits a moderate average level. So I think this ad did have a lot of the core elements to it. Clear CTA, pick this up on the way to your friend's house. It had a personalized state that had something that was very relevant to the listener. They spoke to a need state, which is always super important in the messaging. And, there's a disclaimer at the end. And that's actually something that is a little bit of a debate in audio. It's something very traditional in TV when you're talking about specifically prescription or pharma brands or financial brands, or like this one, speaking about alcohol. And I know a lot of folks are hesitant to include the disclaimer, thinking that it might negatively impact the ad. But we actually have a lot of data behind the scenes that show that disclaimers don't negatively impact the ad. It doesn't necessarily, add to it, but it's something that is a need and a necessity for that brand to advertise. And it's okay because the brand's message and the value in this scenario specifically, and when well done, is able to be given, quickly and efficiently before you get to that disclaimer piece. So no need to fear the disclaimers. They don't always hurt the ad as long as, again, that ad was done right.
All great points. This one's so on the nose with this voice coming right in. Football's back. It's like, okay, all right. I'm trying to connect with a specific audience, like you're saying. From an Audiolytics standpoint, really looking at the substance of the message. This one scored at a 78%, so a little higher than the Home Depot, but not up there with Bed Bath & Beyond, because it does have a lot of clarity. Like even in listening to you, talk back through it, it's like it's clear what they're looking to communicate. Again, though, from an offer and a scarcity and a path standpoint. Path, okay, yeah, you want to go to Whole Foods, elevate your game day with Whole Foods. Like, is there power in changing that with to an at? Those little word choices. I was just listening to the latest episode of Nudge, Phil Agnew's podcast about behavioral science, and it was all about, the entire most recent episode is all about the difference of switching from one word to another. Like the difference of when you're asking somebody to do something, what should you do versus what could you do? And that should tends to shut people down and narrow their choices. Could tends to open them up and they become more creative, right? So in this case, I look at that. Elevate your game day with Whole Foods Market. Elevate your game day at Whole Foods Market. Could that make a difference? Changing that word right there when it comes to the offer, scarcity, and the path. And I think it's interesting, like thinking through, offer scarcity, like, okay, there's a moment in time, right? Like what's a temporal landmark? Like Daniel Pink talks about, like, when's this moment? Headed to a friend's house. Well, that's scarce, right? Because you're going to do that in time and it will happen. There is a sense of some scarcity there of going, hey, make sure you do this before you head over to your friend's house.
You bring in that psychology play to it, talking about words in this instance. It's a big factor when you talk about the discount, or really what it comes down to is the perceived value to an individual. And going back to thinking about the industry, thinking about the product, thinking about the barrier to entry, going to Whole Foods, right? That's typically a smaller investment, if you will, for a product that you have an immediate need state for. So often you can get away in this example, right, for not really giving a high value offer, or, even $1 off or % off, or a buy one, get one free offer, because you're speaking to that need. It's interesting, before I came over to the audio industry in Veritonic, my career was in consumer pricing and promotions. And what we tested is, at a grocery store, at a retail store, online, what is the best way to give a perceived value? Is $5 off the same as 25% off, the same as buy two, get one free? The actual value or the actual discount may be the same, to the T, but consumers would react differently based on their perceived value. So if it was a high, barrier to entry, a high purchase price, a product that was $50, $100, and they saw, save $10 coupon, they were a much higher opportunity to react to that, even though it was only a 10% discount. And that's a really big reality to take into consideration here, is that psychology plays such a big role in the need and the perceived value. And you're speaking to that specifically on scarcity and path here.
Exactly. It's a cool time to be in marketing where, behavioral science is coming to the forefront. This evidence-based stuff is coming to the forefront, where it's like, sure, it's not rocket science, but there are things that we can observe and then data that we can collect that help us make the most informed decision on why we're making the ad this specific way. All right, so we've got 3 ads so far: Bed Bath & Beyond, the Home Depot, and Whole Foods. Right now, our champion that had both the highest Audiolytics score and the highest Veritonic score is Bed Bath & Beyond. So let's see if maybe Macy's unseats them. I don't know. Let's take a listen.
The seasons are changing, so make sure your wardrobe is keeping up. Macy's has everything you need to add to your style, not overpower it. We're talking about their must-haves, like flirty fall dresses, tall boots, or faux leather jackets that you can add to any of your favorite looks for a fresh take. Just check out Macys.com/ownyourstyle to stay updated on all the ways to bring your vibe into the new season. Plus, shop the way you want. Pick up in-store, use curbside pickup, or order with same-day delivery to make your life easier. Head on over to Macys.com for more details.
All right. So how did Macy's do, Amanda?
For us, this one scored a 58. So a little bit lower than the others. And again, Bed Bath & Beyond was a 64 against the Veritonic audio score. And, this one was the lowest on attributes. It was the lowest on recall. Now, it's still above benchmarks. But, one thing I see here is the energy was scored lower. And we hear it's a little bit more of a relaxed tone. That doesn't always mean a bad thing, but it's definitely an observation. And one element that stood out to me here is, there wasn't a promo, there wasn't a value. It spoke to making your life easier. And I think that definitely can resonate with some folks. But I also think this ad might have, a little bit more challenge grabbing the attention of, okay, what was it again that I need to get out of this ad? Macy's is interesting, right? Because, like other retailers, there's often some type of promotion that's always happening. So, how do you stay present and top of mind in between those, big holiday events, or, the big friends and family savings? So I do think this was a great way to fill the gaps of an ad, or a campaign space that keeps Macy's relevant, top of mind against its competitors, but is still speaking to some of those brand awareness metrics, right, around high favorability or high awareness that it's likely to have to play in.
I like what you said there, Amanda, where it's like it's hard to remember, right? Like even within seconds of listening to the ad, it also had the lowest score in Audiolytics at a 66.7%. So lowest score Veritonic predictive score, lowest score in Audiolytics. And that's something, as we do more episodes of that Infinitum and bring in experts, like yourself, or different methodologies that we see, they tend to track together to go like, it's good to get different views and different ways of looking at the creative. And we all can recognize when it's stronger and more potent and more persuasive, and when it's not quite there. But it's so helpful to have the score and have the data to back it up. But in this case, it is tying into the seasonality, but like, it's funny, it's Macy's. There isn't an offer. And, when I think of Macy's, I do think of some sort of discount or something like that. The path, it is a specific URL they're asking you to go to, Macy's.com/your-own-style to stay updated on ways to bring your vibe into the new season. And then at the end, they say, head on over to Macy's.com for more details. They don't use that again. So they only mention that, in my book, a little bit longer custom URL one time, so there would be an opportunity there for more clarity. But when we look at all 4 of these together now, so we've got Bed Bath & Beyond came in with a 64, Home Depot at a 62, Whole Foods at a 60, Macy's at a 58. Is that the same way you would rank them? Would you stand behind those Veritonic predictive scores?
I would. And, there's 2 parts to this that are always critical. There's understanding how your ads do to a gen pop. If you're going to a listener base of a podcast or you're targeting, something at a little level, you do want an ad that can speak to a bunch of different demographics or behaviors and interests. But I think ultimately with any one of these ads, and like we talked about with the Whole Foods, when you really want to understand how this ad is going to perform against a core audience or have the opportunity to really optimize the strategy and use multiple different ads with multiple different voiceovers and calls to actions and messages, and really understand how does that speak to millennials? How does it speak to an older demographic? How does that speak to, someone who's interested in football versus not? That's where really taking the opportunity to test against that core audience with some of the work, that you're very closely familiar with, Stu, from the Oxford Road side. That's where the true optimization really comes in. But at surface level, 100%, I think, just even if I went to listen and understanding what these retail brands are trying to accomplish, this feels right to me.
I think so too. And it's like, just thinking back to them, I'm like, I still feel good about the Bed Bath & Beyond spot. Like, I can remember the bass lick. Like it makes you feel good. It's clear. I think to your point about audience, it's like it's a general message that's done well to the general audience. The Home Depot one, and then from an offer standpoint, it's strong. 25% off a coupon, and I have to specifically get the new app to get that, right? So from offer, scarcity, and path standpoint, and they sweeten the deal. They throw in some free shipping, and then next down in the scoring, it's like the Veritonic score followed exactly the order of the ads as we went through them. With Home Depot, it's like, I feel like this was kind of laced in with your answer is like, yeah, it was Home Depot, but man, it didn't feel as Home Depot as other spots do. So it gets points for being a host read ad, but there was definitely opportunities for it to be stronger. It does have the 40% off offer. So from an offer standpoint, it's still there, but it did not feel as distinct or as engaging as the Bed Bath & Beyond spot. And then Whole Foods is so specific, which really you bring up a great point. This is specifically talking about football. We're pushing to that audience. Like we said, there's maybe some word choices stuff you could do different. Maybe they could throw in some kind of offer, but they've got the scarcity built in there in the sense of, hey, I'm tying this to something that you're doing that's going to happen in time, and so you need to take this action. And then at the bottom of the heap, we've got Macy's, where it just didn't feel terribly memorable, but to your point as well, I think it's an impression and it's mentioning Macy's and it is tying itself to the season. But there are definitely opportunities for the Home Depot, the Whole Foods ad, and the Macy's spots to be stronger, while Bed Bath & Beyond is our clear winner of this episode.
I definitely agree. The consumer wants to have a perceived value, a sense of, I won, I got this great deal, or I got this item that is not widely available to all. And in whatever way marketers can do that in advertising, I think that's the sweet spot right there. And it's this type of language that you play around with, and the importance of testing at the end of the day, because it gives you a sandbox environment to say, okay, what is it that's actually capturing the consumer's attention? And you think about the current environment that we're in with inflation and just cost savings. Retailers likely aren't in the place to do as much promotion, perhaps if they had historically. So what is it that can recreate a perceived value, perceived need, and still be effective, but allowing them a little bit more of that flexibility? And that's the ongoing challenge. What worked yesterday might not work tomorrow, but how to stay abreast by what consumers are looking for, the desires that they have, and ultimately what's going to make them take action.
Very well said. Yes. It's being friendly with reality and looking at the ad, listening to the ad, looking at your Veritonic score and accepting, oh, I got a 58, or accepting, oh, I got a 64, or my Audiolytics score, and then going, okay, well, that means I could do this or that to improve it, or because of the brief and the brand or our decisions, maybe that's not where we want to go, right? It's not one size fits all, and none of this is prescriptive to me when we're analyzing ads and talking about them through whatever lens it is. It's descriptive and just going like, okay, we're going to accept this is where we stand. Do we like where we stand, or do we want to change it? So thank you, Amanda, for joining Ad Infinitum, where we discuss audio advertising and break down audio ads. This week with a focus on Audiolytics Key Components number 6, 7, and 8, offer, scarcity, and path. If there's anything else you would like to say, Amanda, to the chief audio officers listening as they're working on their promotions and their offers, do you have any parting words of wisdom? You've already given us so much that you'd like to leave the listener with.
I'd say just don't be afraid to push the envelope and learn and reconnect with your audiences and consumers to check back in and have the opportunity to understand what works best for you, how it works all together, and being able to put data behind it to help guide it is going to be in your best interests, your best efforts. It's another tool in your toolbox that really helps create that success that we're looking for in any given promotion or campaign.
Yes, and Veritonic is a very powerful tool. So thanks again, Amanda. And for you listeners, if you've got aspects of audio advertising you'd like to discuss or suggestions for a guest on the show or want to be a guest, please email creative@oxfordroad.com. That's CREATIVE @oxfordroad.com. And until next time, remember to have fun making the ads work.